Now is my chat with Mohammed. Good morning, Mohammed. Welcome to the Channel the Rage podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
That's great. Mate, you're suing Tommy Robinson, the nefarious anti-Muslim campaigner, for defaming Jamal, the 16-year-old Syrian refugee who was savagely beaten by racist teenage thugs at a school in the UK. Why are you suing him?
Well, essentially for defamation. What happened was Jamal, having travelled over to the UK from over in Syria 2 years ago, he then managed to settle himself in the UK, went into a school, and unfortunately suffered 2 years of abuse at the hands of bullies. Now, when all of this came out, the narrative was pretty clear, with Jamal, but Mr. Robinson decided that he would spread lies about Jamal, trying to paint him out to be the author of his own sort of victimhood, really, by saying that he had attacked some schoolgirls himself, white girls, that he had attacked them with hockey sticks and had actually bitten them, and this was entirely made up. I think it appears his aim was to try and stem the flow of donations that the general public had seen fit to bestow upon Jamal.
Right. And tell me a little bit about Jamal. I mean, he obviously escaped Syria. Close relatives of his were tortured and killed by the Assad regime. Is that correct?
Right, one of his uncles, I think it was. The family were picked up by the Assad regime, and one of his cousins or uncles was killed in that encounter. So his father then made the very sensible decision to take his family out of there. They moved to Lebanon initially, and then on to the UK through a UN program.
Okay. And so they've been in the UK for 2 years, and I mean, the experience for both Jamal and his sister has been nothing but horrific. Both, experiencing, the worst kind of bullying. I mean, there's a video clip that surfaced of his sister also being picked upon.
Yeah.
Right. And so how is Jamal, now you're obviously, how's his state of mind? How's his feeling in regards to what can only be described as a, widespread outpouring of support for him?
Well, to be fair, that's gone a long way to healing the wounds that the family has suffered. I mean, their experience in the UK has been pretty negative. It's not just the bullies that are of concern. There are horrible people everywhere, even amongst children, but it's really the failures of the institutions around them that's been particularly galling. That would be the school, the council, everywhere they've turned for help. It hasn't been forthcoming. It certainly hasn't been in a way that's been of any help to, the horror that their kids were suffering here, really. The experience of that is that the UK wasn't a particularly friendly place, to say the least, towards them. But this outpouring of support, that's gone a long way to show them that actually that's not the general nature of the British public. The British public are very accommodating, very warm and generous on the whole. But we're just going through a particularly bad time of it when it comes to refugees in the last few years anyway, with the way our politics have been going. And they were at the sharp end of the stick with that, with respect to things like a hostile environment. And this is what a hostile environment really looks like.
Exactly. I mean, for those who haven't seen the video, can you describe what happened to Jamal in the video?
Well, the video appears to have been taken by one of the bullies themselves, as further sort of humiliation upon humiliation for their victim. It shows a boy walking up to Jamal, who's walking with another boy. The other boy walks off fairly quickly. Jamal is in a cast. His arm is broken from a previous incident. And then the bully himself grabs hold of Jamal's neck, says some words towards him, throws him on the ground, and then pours water over his face while saying, "I'm going to drown you," and then walks away.
Right. And so when the video came out, how long after the actual event was that?
Well, no, the video had actually circulated on the same day as the event. That was sometime in mid-October. But there wasn't any pickup on that. This was something that was shared amongst people at the school on Snapchat and Instagram, and it was actually showed to the police at the time as well. But it went somewhat viral about a month later.
Right.
So I think the story behind Jamal had been circulating in the school. We'd written some letters to the local MP, and I think somebody out there put one and one together with the letter that we'd sent to the MP requesting help and the video that was circulating, and the two were combined to make it go viral, really.
And the initial reaction of the school was, were they slow to react to it, or did they do a good job in getting out in front of it?
I mean, I think the PR around the Titanic has been better, really.
Okay.
To be fair, that school, I can't imagine who's trying to deal with this situation there. But we'd written to them some time ago. They hadn't responded at all. They hadn't even attempted to make contact with us as his lawyers. Even after the situation went viral, we were getting standard letters coming in through the post saying everything's fine. And to add, insult to injury, we get a letter or a statement from the school, really, in written form, to say everything's in hand on the very day that his sister's being bullied and videoed being bullied with the hijab being pulled off in the playground. So, something isn't adding up there at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So where does your case stand at the moment against Tommy Robinson?
Okay, so Robinson really this is a case in defamation against him and maybe other platforms as well. Mm-hmm. We're looking into Robinson's background. We don't really want him to have go through a trial process and not have or show that he doesn't have the ability to compensate Jamal. So we're looking into his background at the moment, his finances, and we're hoping to cast a wide net so that we will throw a letter of claim in his direction. He will then have 3 months to respond. And if he responds by suggesting that he has a defense of some sort, then we will be taking him to court.
I mean, there's been some excellent reporting recently. I believe it was in The Guardian. I mean, it shows that his financial backing is vast and widespread from a slew of right-wing groups in the United States and elsewhere. Are you digging further than what's already been reported by media outlets in The Guardian?
We're going to be digging deep so that we can catch all the roots. Frankly, this is not something you do lightly with somebody who's been convicted of mortgage fraud and illegal immigration, where he's used a fake passport or somebody else's passport to get into another country. So he's quite adept at covering his tracks, and we're hoping to peel back the layers on that before we actually drop the axe, so to speak.
Right. Have you had any response from his lawyers?
No, we haven't, no.
Right. And, I mean, are you worried in any sense that, I mean, you know what his supporters are like, you know the type of narratives that they espouse. Do you have a concern that if your case does pick up traction in the media, that there's only going to increase his sense of his perceived sense of victimhood, or turn him even more into the so-called free speech martyr?
Well, I think that's the whole point of free speech, is that we're all given an equal contribution to the space, so that he will say what he has to say, but ultimately there are limits to that, in that you can't lie about other people, and if you do and you spread them and it causes harm, then there's a consequence to that, and that's what we want to have a very clear airing around. Our problem with, or Jamal's problem, certainly ours on his behalf with him, is not that he spoke or he speaks even incredulously. The issue that we have with him is that he tells lies, and on the back of those lies he causes damage to other people. That's the particular issue we're taking with him, not his right to speech or his right maybe to even avail himself of victimhood, however difficult in fact that I find that to fit with him.
Yeah. I've made a point recently, I mean, in a piece for TRT World, which basically singled out Tommy as a terrorist preacher, no different to someone like Anwar al-Awlaki, the now deceased Al-Qaeda and Arabian Peninsula leader. I mean, al-Awlaki never committed a terrorist attack himself, only espoused, propaganda online, which incited others to carry out his deeds. If you look at all these right-wing terrorist attacks which are occurring, particularly against Muslims and immigrants in the United Kingdom, whether it's the Finsbury Park attacker or the kid that beat up Jamal at the school in Huddersfield, I mean, you'll find Tommy Robinson's footprints all over their social media platforms. So do you believe he's a terrorist preacher, or is somebody who incites terrorism?
No, I wouldn't go that far, personally. I find it very uncomfortable to try and put the blame of an adult who takes action at the feet of somebody who talks about something rhetorically. There is certainly a sociological issue with that. There's a social connection, but in terms of a legal one, I think that's always been a slippery road. And I think this war on terror narrative that we've been dealing with for the last nearly 20 years has been paved with those sort of good intentions of trying to put people away for what they say rather than for what they do. And it's led us to a situation politically where people feel that they can't express their views, however unpleasant those views might be. And I think that sort of nanny state type closure of discussion and even rhetoric leads to people having the gripe and the feeling that they're not being heard, and that leads to a sort of tribal politics. So as much as I would like to see people being sensible, I'm very much against the idea of forcing people to be sensible, whatever that means. And if we look at, let's say, the prevent strategy, which is one of the limbs that are being used, I'm very much a person who's against that in that it's a tool that's far too powerful for a state to use, and it's too convenient for them to use to put down political discussions. Now, with respect to Tommy Robinson, he didn't come from absolutely nowhere. He came from a small town which had its problems, and he had legitimate concerns and legitimate gripes from that town. He's now evolved into a completely different creature, but had those concerns and gripes been well aired, heard, and responded to, then there wouldn't have been a cause or casus belli for Robinson to get behind.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's an excellent point you just made. I guess my point was, if Tommy Robinson, I guess pointing at the double standard, if Tommy Robinson was a high school kid or a college student with that kind of social media platform espousing the kind of ideas that he does, and he were a Muslim, and these ideas were Islamist rather than far right-wing extremism, he would certainly be referred to prevent and then on to channel, wouldn't you say?
No, I think that's right, and I think that's starting to happen now in terms of, if you look at the behemoth that is the prevent strategy and the counterterrorism sort of tools, they've almost exclusively been honed at Muslims. But that is, in this year, maybe since really the Finsbury Park Osman attack, that's now being recalibrated. And to our knowledge, we know that the prevent tools are being now zeroed in and focused on the far right. But just because it's happening to one group, I know it sounds good to have inequality and balance, but I believe it's a very flawed tool. And because it's been used against one group, I think it's been used detrimentally against that group. It's been counterproductive. And I believe if it's pushed on another group, it will also be counterproductive there too. The tool is flawed, and I don't believe it should be wielded in any direction, even though in terms of the scales of justice at the moment, it would seem that Robinson ought to attract the same sort of attention as the so-called extremists on the Islamic side have attracted. But as I say, the danger is the tool rather than the idea of this sort of justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mohammed, thank you so much for your time and sharing, your insights to what's happening, in the case that you're leading. I mean, there's a lot of people that are watching this with a great deal of interest, particularly because we do have a problem with right-wing extremism in Western democratic societies, and the funding for these individuals and groups is vast, and not only coming from individuals but also from nation states. So, mate, we wish you all the best, and we look forward to tracking and following this case with great interest.
I'm very grateful for your interest. Thank you.
Okay, all the best to you.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the Channel the Rage podcast.